Preface. Ethereal Hollywood is a world reconfigured from the golden age of Hollywood, where the legendary stars are not just memories, but immortal archetypes, still living in their own parallel alternative reality. Familiar history is not duplicated but flexible and constantly revisioning itself along diverse pathways. Time and space are also more fluid and less binding. And what has been called magic works in odd and unusual ways, producing scenarios from the silly to the surreal. And since these stories are in an alternative world or dimension, there are variances from real-world facts, such as the relationship between characters, studios, events. This is a fluid world where history flows in unexpected directions. These are audiobooks with imagery synced to the narrative as much as possible, serving as quasi-storyboards to give a rough visual dimension to the stories. 4 Cowboy Icons Ride Again. Book 20 of the Ethereal Hollywood series. By Arnold Kalnitsky. The universe of Ethereal Hollywood was painted in a perpetual magic hour. Its sun hung low in a lavender sky, refusing to set, casting the world in a wash of gold and inky, dramatic shadows. Boulevards paved with shimmering celluloid stretched between Art Deco monoliths, and along them drifted the residents, their whispered conversations forming the ambient soundtrack of a world built from dreams. In a quiet corner of this dreamscape, where the golden light seemed a little dimmer and the shadows stretched a little longer, 4 figures sat around a rickety table at the Last Chance Saloon, a facade that served lukewarm sarsaparilla. Their iconic forms, once the brightest images on the silver screen, now felt overexposed and faded. Hopalong Cassidy, his back ramrod straight, adjusted the high white Stetson that crowned his shock of equally white hair. His usual calm was frayed at the edges. Across from him, Autry, America's favorite singing cowboy, idly strummed a silent chord on an imaginary guitar, his brow furrowed. Beside him, the Cisco Kid, usually a supernova of charisma, leaned forward, his infectious laugh conspicuously absent. His faithful sidekick, Pancho, sat a little ways off, polishing a saddle that hadn't seen a real horse in ages, his face a mask of loyal concern. And then there was Roy Rogers, the king of the Cowboys. He stared into his glass, the effervescence of the sarsaparilla holding more life than he felt in his soul. "It's the quiet," Roy said, his voice as smooth as worn leather. "I can't stand the quiet. There used to be the sound of kids in the Saturday matinees. The cheer when Trigger reared up. Now, there's just the whispering." Gene nodded, finally looking up. "They're whispering about the new archetypes, Roy. The anti-heroes. The complex protagonists. Fellas in dark coats who mumble about the futility of it all. There's no room for a clear-eyed hero who sings a song about right in the range." "Huh." The sound from Cisco was sharp, more bitter than mirthful. "They say we are too simple. Black and white, they say. As if justice is a complicated color. Oye, Pancho, do you think we are too simple?" Pancho looked up, his expression earnest. "Cisco, you're the smartest, most clever man I know. And I am simple enough to know that is the truth." "It's not about simple," Hoppy said, his voice a low rumble of authority. He tapped a finger on the table. "It's about relevance. We were symbols. We taught right from wrong. We were the story that parents wanted their children to hear. That narrative, it's been misplaced." Just then, the celluloid boulevard outside shimmered with a new intensity. A procession of the ethereal extras turned their heads in unison. A new star, a figure in a rain-slicked trench coat with a face perpetually obscured by shadow and cigarette smoke, strode past. The whispers rose in a chorus of awe. "Noir Jones," they sighed. "He uncovers the darkness in the heart of the narrative itself." Roy watched him go, a pang of something sharp and cold in his chest. Dale Evans, his beloved wife and co-star, laid a gentle hand on his shoulder as she joined the table. Her presence was a comforting glow. "Don't let them dim your light, Roy," she said softly. "A good man on a good horse is never out of style." But what if the horse is forgotten in the stable, Dale? Roy lamented. What if the trail's gone cold? It was then that Pat Brady, Roy's ever-flustered but loyal sidekick, came rattling up in his cantankerous Jeep, Nellybelle. The Jeep coughed and wheezed, its engine sounding like a coffee percolator in its final moments. Pat scrambled out, clutching a dusty, cracked film canister. Roy, Hoppy, I found something, he panted, his face smudged with dust. I was down in the archive vaults, you know, where they keep the deleted scenes and the lost episodes. Found this old can. There's no label, just a symbol. He placed it on the table. Etched into the rusted metal was a simple, radiant sun with a strip of film running through its center. Hoppy leaned in, his eyes sharp. I recognize that. That's the mark of the first scribe. The original storyteller. Legend says he created the Genesis reel, the master narrative from which all our archetypes were struck. The source code for heroism. Gene Autry's eyes lit up. You mean the story that started all our stories? The very same, Hoppy confirmed. It was said to be stored at the highest point in Ethereal Hollywood, atop the Mount of Montage, to keep the light of clear, strong narratives burning bright for everyone. A collective realization dawned on them. Their fading relevance wasn't just a trend, it was a symptom. The source was failing. The light was going out. Well, I'll be, Roy said, a spark returning to his eyes. He stood up, slapping his hand on the table. If a story's gone missing, then it's up to us to go find it. We're not just saving ourselves. We're saving the very idea of the hero. The Cisco Kid leapt to his feet, his signature laugh finally, truly returning, a joyous peal of sound that cut through the gloom. A quest. Ah, Pancho, it is like the old days. We will ride again. See, Cisco. Pancho beamed, dropping his polishing rag. And so, the posse was formed. Roy Rogers, the heart, Hopalong Cassidy, the mind, Gene Autry, the soul, and the Cisco Kid, the spirit. Dale Evans insisted on coming, her quiet strength a necessary anchor. Pat Brady fired up Nellybelle with a nervous grin, while Roy gave a sharp whistle. From the shadows, two figures emerged. Trigger, the golden palomino, trotted forward, his intelligence shining in his eyes, and at his heels was Bullet, the German shepherd, his tail wagging with anticipation. Their journey began, a strange caravan moving through the dreamscape. Nellybelle chugged along the shimmering boulevards, past sets for forgotten musicals and soundstages haunted by the echoes of screwball comedies. Their destination, the Mount of Montage, loomed in the distance, a colossal peak made not of rock, but of stacked, petrified film reels. Their first obstacle was the canyon of cut scenes. Here, the ground fell away into a chasm filled with a swirling vortex of discarded moments. A lone close-up of a tearful heroine, a stuntman's leap frozen midair, a line of dialogue with no context, they all floated in a disorienting soup. We'll never get Nellybelle across that, Pat Brady fretted. We won't have to, Roy said, patting Trigger's neck. We'll go the old way. Leaving Pat and the Jeep to find a longer route, the others ventured in. The air was thick with regret and missed opportunities. Gene nearly got lost, mesmerized by a forgotten ballad he'd recorded that never made it to the screen. But Dale's voice called him back. That's the past, honey. We're riding for the future. It was Cisco and Pancho, with their quick wits, who found the way, a narrow bridge formed from a single, unbroken tracking shot from an old epic, stable and secure. They regrouped with Pat on the other side and pushed on, only to face the badlands of bad reviews. This was a desolate expanse where the whispers of critics had solidified into sharp, cutting rocks. Voices hissed from the ground, predictable plot. Wooden acting, one-dimensional. The words stung, eroding their confidence. Hoppy's white Stetson seemed to droop. Roy's shoulders slumped. Even Trigger's ears flattened against his head. They're right, Gene murmured. Maybe we are just simple. It was Roy who fought back. He drew in a breath, not of despair, but of defiance. He began to sing, a clear, honest tune about a cowboy's code, about standing tall when the winds blew cold. I'm back in the saddle again, out where a friend is a friend. Gene joined in, his voice harmonizing perfectly, the melody pushing back against the whispers. The song wasn't complex, it was true. The power of its sincerity acted as a shield, smoothing their path through the desolate landscape. The rocks seemed to lose their edge, the voices fading into a harmless hiss. Finally, they reached the base of the Mount of Montage. The climb was treacherous, a winding path of slippery celluloid. As they ascended, they passed through eras of storytelling. They saw the flickering black and white images of their own beginnings, the vibrant technicolor of their peak, and then, the colors began to desaturate. The images grew darker, more fragmented. At the summit, they found a cavern. Inside, on a massive, ancient projector, was the Genesis reel. It was supposed to be a brilliant, shining gold, but it was now a tarnished, flickering bronze. The film was tangled and knotted, and a creeping, formless gray fog, the static of indifference, was consuming it, draining its light and color. This was the source of the decay, the abstract villain of apathy that preferred muddled grays to clear blacks and whites. It's worse than we thought, Hoppy said gravely. The story is breaking. The static pulsed, sensing them. The whispers returned, louder now. Your time is over. You have no place here. You are irrelevant. Pancho shrank back. Cisco, I am afraid. Cisco put a hand on his friend's shoulder, his eyes blazing. He drew his prop pistol with a flourish and laughed, not his usual joyous laugh, but a laugh of pure, unadulterated defiance. Afraid. Pancho, my friend, we have faced banditos, corrupt landowners, and terrible singers in cantinas. This is just a bad mood. His laughter, so out of place in the heart of despair, seemed to make the static recoil. Roy knew what they had to do. They couldn't fight this fog with fists or bullets. They had to overwhelm it with what they were. They had to perform their archetypes with absolute conviction. Hoppy, you're the law, Roy commanded. Gene, you're the heartland. Cisco, you're the joy. Dale, you're the faith. Pat, you just be yourself, that's loyalty. Trigger, Bullet, your friendship. Hopalong Cassidy stood tall, his posture the embodiment of integrity. He spoke no words, but his presence alone was a declaration that justice does not bend. The static hissed and drew back from his unwavering form. Gene Autry stepped forward and sang a new song, not one of nostalgia, but of promise. It was a song about how the sun always rises, how a helping hand is never weak, how good deeds are their own reward. The simple, powerful melody began to untangle the knotted film. Cisco and Pancho moved through the cavern like a whirlwind of optimism, their banter and laughter a counter-frequency to the drone of apathy. They tightened loose spools and patched torn frames, their very presence a celebration of adventure over ennui. Dale spoke softly of home, of community, of the simple, unbreakable bonds of family. Her words were a warm light that pushed back the encroaching grayness. All the while, Roy Rogers, the king, stood at the projector's heart, his hand on the fading Genesis reel. He wasn't singing or speaking, he was simply believing. He poured into the film all the hope, all the earnestness, all the uncomplicated decency he had represented for a generation. He remembered the face of every child who had ever looked up to him, and he acted for them. Slowly, miraculously, the Genesis reel began to glow. First a flicker, then a steady, warm light. The tarnished bronze burned away, revealing the brilliant gold beneath. The static of indifference shrieked and dissolved, unable to exist in the presence of such profound, unapologetic sincerity. The light from the reel flooded the cavern and burst from the top of the Mount of Montage, a beacon of pure, narrative power that washed over ethereal Hollywood. Down on the boulevards, the perpetual magic hour deepened, the golds becoming richer, the lavender sky more vibrant. The extras looked up, a sense of forgotten warmth filling them. Even the shadow-drenched figure of Noir Jones paused, looked up at the beacon, and for a moment, the darkness around him seemed a little less absolute. Their quest was over. As they descended the mountain, they could feel the change. Their own colors felt brighter, their outlines sharper. They weren't the newest story, but they were once again a vital one. Back at the Last Chance Saloon, Roy Rogers looked out at the restored world. He knew things wouldn't be exactly as they were. There were new stories to be told, new heroes for new times. But he also knew that their place was secure. "You know," he said, a genuine smile spreading across his face as Dale took his hand. "I feel a song coming on." Gene Autry grinned, finally strumming a real, resonant chord on his guitar. Hopalong Cassidy permitted himself a small, satisfied smile. And from the corner, the Cisco Kid's laughter rang out, full and true, with Pancho's loyal echo right beside him. They were the Western Stars. Their trail had been long, and the landscape had changed, but they were, and would always be, back in the saddle again. And in the endless, shimmering dream of Ethereal Hollywood, that was a story that would never fade.